Good day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Katie Bianchi. I am a cisgender female. My pronouns are she and her. I am also a super proud Splunker and member of the LGBTQ+ community. Today, during Transgender Awareness Week, and alongside a few of my amazing colleagues, I have the privilege of doing two of, quite frankly, my favorite things. Teeing up Splunk as a great place to work, thrive, and grow for folks in our community, and having a critically important and open discussion about being out at work as a transgender and/or non-binary employee and how we all can practice better allyship. We'll spend most of the next hour chatting and taking your questions, but first, just a little bit about Splunk, what we do, and also, most importantly, how we do it. Splunk is the platform for turning data into doing. Every day, we imagine a world where data provides clarity, elevates discussion, and accelerates progress. Our cloud platform drives these values and outcomes for our customers in security, IT, and DevOps every single day. Most of the Fortune 100 rely on us to do this. We're growing very quickly and strongly year over year, and we have more than 6,000 awesome worldwide employees who contribute their talent, their diversity, and their passion to the products and services that we deliver for our customers. So as I said, as important in what we do is how we do it. We value passion, innovation, fun, disruption, and openness. And these values are underpinned by our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. All of our ERGs, including our Pride group, do amazing work. Our Pride group is a passionate group of folks alongside of our executive sponsorship team who are making a difference every day and focusing on 4 key pillars. And also, as is our spirit, keeping fun at the heart of everything we do. So the team's focused on awareness and education, community, attracting, promoting, and retaining diverse talent, and policy and advocacy. In addition to ensuring gender-neutral restrooms and improved healthcare, one accomplishment that our team can be especially proud of this year is the LGBTQ+ trans and non-binary inclusion guidance and support policy. This is a rich resource for Splunkers that actually started with a signed commitment from our executive staff to ensure that everyone at Splunk feels able to dress in a manner that is consistent with their gender identity or gender expression. That every Splunker will be addressed by the name and the pronoun that corresponds to their gender identity, and has access to the restroom that corresponds with their gender identity, regardless of their sex assigned at birth. It also includes education, guidance, and resources to support LGBTQ+ Splunkers and let them know that this is a place they can bring their truest selves and thrive doing it. I've been at and around many companies in my career, and one of the things I can say without a doubt as a member of the community is that Splunk is an awesome place to be. You're all here listening today because you realize the value of diversity, equity, inclusion to drive progress, innovation, and community. So those looking for a great next opportunity, please check us out. And now I am really, really excited to introduce you to the folks I am lucky enough to share the virtual stage with today and start our discussion. So we all know it is Transgender Awareness Week, and a major purpose of this week is to educate ourselves and others about transgender and non-binary people and their experiences. Knowing that there is a ton of emotional labor put on our communities to educate and explain things, I just want to start with a huge thank you to Naya, Taylor, Mickey, and Alexis for taking the time with us today. And as a reminder, we've got the Q&A section teed up in chat. Please feel free to ask your candid questions there. These will only be seen by our moderator team and our panelist. So let's get to it. Let's start with our introductions. And Naya, I'll pass it over to you.
Cool, hello. My name is Naya. I prefer she, her pronouns. I'm wearing a yellow sweater. And I'm on unceded Arapaho and Cheyenne land, known today as Broomfield. And I'm a software engineer and part of the Pride ERG and Disabled Equal True ERGs here at Splunk.
Taylor.
Hi, thank you, Katie. My name is Taylor Freeman. I always have to practice that one. I am the Technical Enablement Coordinator under Customer Success. I am also the Program Manager for the BEAMS ERG, which is the Black Employees and Mentors group here at Splunk. And I am seated on Piscataway and Monarch land, which is modern day Alexandria, Virginia.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mickey. I'm on unceded Ohlone land, today known as San Francisco. I'm wearing black today, as I usually do most days for a very long time now. I am an engineering director and head of SRE in the Cloud org, and I'm part of the Pride and Women in Engineering ERGs.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alexis Lucio. I use she, her, they, them pronouns. Speaker description, I've got past shoulder length brown hair with bangs. Today I'm wearing my large rim glasses and a lavender button up with pink bunnies in space. Getting festive because I can actually see people today. I'm on unceded Ramaytush and Ohlone land, known as San Francisco, California, and I'm the accessibility and inclusive design lead for Splunk. I'm also a member of the Pride ERG and co-lead Somos, which is our Latinx employee research group.
Thank you, Alexis, and thanks for bringing the fun with your shirt. Okay, so given one of our values is openness, we decided that we would go right into the tough questions. So first up front, and we'll start with you, Mickey. How has the pandemic influenced being out at work for you? And how has the Zoom culture on top of that impacted being out at work?
It's a really interesting question. Like, obviously we're now in a very sort of weird visual medium. I actually only joined Splunk during the pandemic, so that's been doubly weird for me. But in some ways, like, the camera is kinder than real life. Everybody is the same height on Zoom, which is good. Like, there's much less of a thing about, you know, how nice are your shoes and various other things like that. But sometimes, like, the complication is, particularly for transgender folks, is that sometimes our voices are not what we would, are not taken the way that we would like them to be taken. And so you have to be more deliberate about deciding what modality you're using when you're remote. And sometimes you have to be careful about, you know, as a hiring manager myself, like, one of the things that I want to make sure of is that I'm very open and candid with people that are considering joining my org. And so you know, it is important for me that I'm on video calls with everybody so that there's, you know, no surprises that turn into unfortunate situations down the line. And so, like, there's a challenge for me around situations where video is not available. And, you know, how do I present myself when it's a purely audio conversation and make sure that I'm actually conveying the things that are important for me to convey about myself?
Yeah, absolutely. Taylor, what's been your experience?
Well, for me, I don't like making things a thing. So once I decided to have top surgery, I knew after that would come the pronoun conversation. And at the time, I was still kind of iffy on what exactly I wanted those to be. And I think if we were still in person, the type of person I am, internalizing and overthinking, I don't know if I would have been able to verbally initiate that conversation when it comes to, I want to go by they and them. But luckily with this pandemic, it's as easy as just going into Slack or going into Zoom and just adding the they and them within my header or my signature. And I don't have to worry about any type of scrutiny that I don't want to have, whether it be there are not on the other side of the screen. So in a way, it's kind of helped me out in being comfortable with the transition. And if it becomes a conversation, then it does, but I'll be in control of it then.
Have you found in the, Taylor, for you in the virtual medium, have you found that because you were able to make that switch that it is introducing conversation and questions?
Well, it did for one of my coworkers. He actually messaged me. He said, "Oh, I didn't notice. I'll make that adjustment going forward." And I was like, "Oh, it's no biggie. You know, I just added it in. I'm still figuring it out myself." But I am happy for some people when I did tell them about the surgery, they did ask. That was the first thing they asked was, "What are your pronouns?" And so I told them, and it was like, I'm glad that, again, at first I was kind of nervous because I didn't know, but I'm glad that people are considerate of it, like to ask that question. And it didn't have to be a conversation of, "Oh, why did you choose this one?" It was literally just as simple as, "What do you want to go by as?" "Okay, fine, boom, move on."
Perfect.
I'm curious if there's like other, like Zoom obviously works really well for that. Like we can see, I feel a lot of guilt over having not done it with my Zoom name right now. But like there's also other things that like other tools that people use, like other chat mechanisms, in particular things like teaching sessions, like where, you know, there's a group of people with like, I guess, webinar situations and things like that. Like, is there, are there any environments you've run into where it's, where you can't signal a pronoun using that kind of, name label?
Let's see. No, I think I did it for LinkedIn. I did it for Zoom, Slack. Is there one? I'm not entirely sure. But if it does, I don't make it a thing unless I need to. And I mean, in person, there's still people who refer to me as she and her, and I just kind of keep it moving because I don't know them and I'll probably never see them again. So it doesn't mean anything to me to like bash in them like, no, it's they and them. But if I were to, for the people who care enough, they do get a conversation. Yeah.
And if I can add a section thinking about inclusive design, which is what I get paid to do at Splunk, I think, you know, we can have these titles, and for folks who are low vision or can't see at all, it's really important to take that less than 10 seconds at the beginning of a meeting when doing introductions and normalizing saying pronouns as well. Because that's someone's indicator that, hey, like whenever I refer to Taylor, like I should use they, them pronouns, even if I can't see what's on Zoom or an email signature.
Absolutely. And Naya, I know when we were kind of talking about some of this ahead of time, you shared some experiences or shared some perspective on how the pandemic may be impacting the LGBTQ plus community disproportionately. So if you can maybe just kind of share your thoughts and share your experience as well. Yes.
So my interest is going to focus a tad less on Splunk itself and more the larger community and influence as a whole. LGBTQ plus folks tend to be more likely on the chopping block for layoffs or furloughs or the like. And so unfortunately, about 2 months into this pandemic, my partner actually was laid off from their job and lost their health care, which was positively devastating given they're a trans man very early in their transition. And so I think by and large, we just need to be aware that LGBTQ plus folks are going to be disproportionately affected by layoffs, loss of healthcare, loss of presence in a lot of positions, especially those in more disadvantaged situations or who aren't in our industry, especially. I don't know, does that answer your question sufficiently?
Yeah, absolutely. And first and foremost, I'm sorry. You know, I actually read an article yesterday that said that between 40 to 60% of transgender people are using hormones that are not prescribed to them because they're underinsured. And it was something it slaps you in the face a bit, right? That it is a matter of life and death and safety and happiness. So Naya, I am sorry. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being brave and sharing that with us.
Well, thank you. In good news, it's all better now though, for my specific situation.
So we touched on this a little bit, but I think the audience would love to hear a little bit more about everyone's individual experience transitioning both at work and at life. So Nikki, we'll start with you.
Sure. I never really came out, like there was never really like a Flag Day thing where I sent out the big email and made announcements. I'm still like, I don't find labels super comfortable. And so I don't really kind of like leaning into them, but I find that there are contexts where they're useful, and work is one of those contexts. Like for me to, particularly when I'm interviewing or talking to companies that I'm considering working at, like for me to be able to say, I am transgender, even though like something inside me like really is not comfortable with like just those words coming out of my mouth, like that is a really useful conversation to have, because it immediately opens up, the question of like, what are the benefits? Like, what is the support? What is the experience of the company with that? So these things are useful, but like it was a really, honestly, like it's a hard kind of conversation for me to have. For me, it was much more about, I grew up in a conservative immigrant family in Australia. And so I did not have access to any kind of social support for basically all of my formative years until I went to university. And then so there was a lot of things that were kind of set in stone and difficult for me at that point. And from that point onwards, it was more about when I changed cities or changed jobs, and I've lived on 3 continents now, I've moved around a fair bit. And so every time I do that, and every time I change jobs or when I change teams within a company, then that's kind of the opportunity to, you're changing the social milieu, you're changing a lot of things. Like it's an opportunity to like take the next step that I'm comfortable with. And so, when I had facial surgery, like I combined that with moving from San Francisco to New York. When I first moved to San Francisco, like that changed how I spoke about myself in dating and friendships and so on. And like I brought a lot of things out that I was still, I was with a group of people, like this extended social network, that I was sort of scared to bring along in Australia, even though, a lot of things I think were understood, even if they weren't spoken. But certainly for me, it was just much easier to make these changes in combination with, and now I'm going to change cities, or I'm going to change teams. And, all of these people would just get to know me from scratch, under these new assumptions or these new ways that I'm sort of willing to present myself. And there's often a difference for me, or there has been for a long time, there was a difference for me in how I presented myself to my friends versus at work. Like I had a different public persona versus a professional persona. And it just took me an incredibly long time. Honestly, like it's been maybe the last few years when finally everything is aligned in my life around, public, personal life, family life, like all of those things. Like, it was just a super long journey, but it was not in a bad way, right? Because there were these parts of my life that I could push ahead in, and work was actually one of the ones that was easiest in many ways, because, of having always this option every few years of, a new team and a new group of people around me.
Do you feel like that journey, especially at work, impacted you negatively in terms of where you want to be on your career path or what you want to do?
So the one that I think I only realized relatively recently by sort of by accident, because like I said, it's only been in the last few years that everything is finally in alignment. Hi. Sorry, my daughter might be joining us.
No apologies.
So I think the big thing for me was, come here, you, say hi to the world. This is my 18-month-old daughter. So the big thing for me was about realizing how much I was holding back from people. So at a lot of I've been in industry for like 25 years now, something like that. And you would think after 25 years, you would have established like a really big professional network. Like there's so many places that I've worked with, so many really talented people that I've worked with, that, those relationships are really valuable and serve you in the rest of your career. But what I realized is that because I was not able to be open with them about who I was, I really held back from building those relationships. And so for a lot of those people, like I don't have those connections. Like I don't have that strength of network that you would expect. And so really, despite having that breadth of experience, like the network that I feel like I can just take for granted is maybe more like somebody who's been doing this for 5 or 10 years rather than 25 years. And that is just a surprisingly big cost. Like I've been, I think, very fortunate in that there have been some really wonderful people that I have been able to be open with. But, you know, I look at other folks who are at a similar point in their career, and their networks are powerful and vast and things like that. And I don't think that's necessarily something that's unique to me or unique to being transgender or even queer. Like I'm sure that there are people who have, you know, minority religious affiliations or political affiliations maybe, who also feel like they cannot be true to themselves and, you know, include everybody in their life in the same way. But I do feel like there's something, when it's something like gender and it's very core to your identity, like in a presentation every day, like I think that is a particularly trenchant thing.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. We will be your network at Splunk, never fear.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Naya, can you share your experience transitioning at work and or in life?
So my experience was quite the opposite. I did have the big, I'm sending an email out. It was quite a diplomatic email, is what I will say, sent to way too large of an audience. But I did in fact do that part. And I told my manager and my director at the time, I think about a week in advance of like, oh, hey, by the way, I'm going to send this email. Good luck. But mostly I told them ahead of time so that they could try and look into resources for me at Splunk. And when I first came out, there weren't really any resources developed yet at that point in time. We didn't have any sort of inclusivity policy. Our healthcare resources were not really documented and still very minimal that year. And so I worked with our ERG lead, Christina, and a few others in the ERG to help develop those resources. And we actually managed to get the, as mentioned in the slide deck earlier, the inclusivity policy, along with a few resources together on the healthcare available. And we actually were able to expand the healthcare coverage a little bit, which was really cool being able to do that. But overall, my experience at work has largely been positive having come out. My manager was almost immediate in the pronoun change. However, I did not change my name. When I first came, I was already going by Naya. I just never corrected the pronouns. And so everyone was very supportive in my organization. And I mean, as there is with any coming out and telling people pronouns, there was obviously a few slip-ups, but everyone was very positive about it. And I didn't have any really negative response back to that. And so I felt very welcomed by my team and my organization within Splunk.
That's awesome. And I just from us to you, thank you for being the spark along with Christina and others behind that policy. You are and will make a difference for so many people. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to hear that.
So on to our next question, and we'll start with you, Alexis. How has seeing an LGBTQ plus person in a position of leadership impacted you?
I think the biggest thing for me is that I'm able to bring more of my full self to work. And, you know, I'm very hesitant to use like all those Silicon Valley buzzwords, but it's true. So I'm part of the product design organization, where recent stats show that we have over 10% of LGBTQIA star identifying folks. There's queer leadership at the management level. Our head of design is open and BIPOC. And the fact is that there's not enough queer BIPOC leadership in tech. And when you see that, it's like, oh, maybe I can do that. Like, huh. And another point that I'll bring up is it is such a relief to have like a lower barrier to entry to people understanding. In particular, the example I'm thinking of is I have a dear friend who got an advancement in their top surgery date, and they live alone. They were like, I don't know if I could get anyone to help me. Like, would you, following all COVID and public health safety precautions, like, can you drive me to the surgery site? Like, could you drive me to post-op? And it would require me to take time off. And because I knew that my manager is out and open to, challenges and last minute things of the queer community, I said all of this very confidently, very candidly. And he was like, yeah, take off anytime you need. That's important. And I can't imagine that that would be the case with our typical cisgendered straight coworkers or, management leadership. So to summarize, like, it makes me think I can do it. It makes me think anyone on this panel can do it. Again, seeing someone like Mickey be a director and like kick ass at it, it's like, oh, maybe we can do this. And just sometimes when the weight of the world is too heavy, knowing that you don't have to explain yourself again about like why this is important or why you need to do this.
Absolutely. We can do this for sure. Taylor, Taylor, what about you?
I think I used to be very much naive. And what I mean by that is like, I never since I came to Splunk, I always came as me. I never thought of they may not, accept me because of how I am or anything like that. It kind of never crossed my mind, even though I know, discrimination as far as even being Black or being young or being a part of the LGBT is there. I personally never experienced it, and I kind of kept that vision. So even when I did see people in these leadership positions, just like you, Katie, like when I think I was working maybe 2 people under you, and they told me, they was like, oh yeah, she's, a part of the community too. And I was like, really? I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. But again, it never crossed my mind that you couldn't do it because of that. It was just like, oh, that's cool too. But it didn't cross my mind that they wouldn't have hired you because of it. So I think that vision, I think I want to keep that vision of, I don't want it to be an abnormal thing. I don't want to be shocked or surprised when I hear someone in the LGBT or community or so on and so forth is in a leadership position. It should just be a thing of, that's normal. That's what it should be. I don't think there should be so much of a reaction. But I'm glad that you are here, as well as Mickey as well.
Thanks, Taylor. I'm glad you're all here. I think this I'm sure you all saw, but Sarah McBride's easy victory in the state Senate for Delaware a couple of weeks ago, making her the highest ranking trans official in the United States. And I think she tweeted, I'll probably not get it 100% accurate, but I think she tweeted something afterwards that was really sort of profound to me and aligned with this question. I think she said something like, I hope tonight her victory, right, shows an LGBTQIA+ kid that, our democracy is big enough for them to live and thrive in too. And I think that's what we're all saying, and what we all want to feel and others to feel as well. Okay, next question, and we're doing well on time here too. Okay, okay, so next question. How can cisgender folks and cisgender queer folks like myself show up for transgender and non-binary community members? Alexis, we're gonna pitch the ball to you to start on this one too, as one of our favorite folks.
Yeah, and I just want to know, I am so honored to be the token cis here. Like, I hope that this is encouraging other panels to do the same. Like, I was reflecting on this morning. I was like, how great is it to be like a token in a good way, because we're actually listening to the voices of people who need to be heard and who haven't been heard in the past. And like, let's continue this momentum. This should not be like, oh my God, finally. It's like, no, like, let's just make this the norm. So to all my cisgendered folks out there who, whether you identify as heterosexual, whether you are a queer cisgender person like myself, what I encourage you to do is open your heart and mind, recognize your internalized transphobia. Maybe it's conscious and you're just not willing to admit it. This was really big for me because my dad over the past years has become more of an ally to the queer community, which, has helped heal my, traumatic coming out experience. And one day he came up to me, he's like, hey, is transsexual like not a good term anymore? And I was like, yes, 100%. But he asked it with such a curiosity. It wasn't like, oh, hey, I'm trying to be funny and crack a dad joke. It was just like, hey, I want to show up for, your friends. How do I do that? And for someone to say that as an older gentleman in their life, that's cool. And I wish more folks would ask from curiosity rather than trying to make trans folks the butt of jokes. You can also open your mouth and call out transphobia when it happens, or hype trans folks up when they're doing something that's super awesome. And an example I can think of was Taylor started a GoFundMe for their top surgery, and they were not super comfortable sharing it on the Pride ERG channel. And I was like, give me the link, I'll throw it up for you and I'll hype you up, and we could totally help you out. And people came through within 2 hours. And at times you need to recognize when it's time to step back, or step back and then push folks forward in a way that shows that they can be supported and shows that they're welcome in their workplace as their full authentic self. And then when in doubt, open your wallet, because late stage capitalism is a thing, and that's how the world works. Cash is king. Donate to a trans foundation or a local community group, because as we've seen from the election, it's the grassroots folks who are really changing the world, and they need support. And that's how we can help, by redistributing our wealth.
Thank you, Alexis. Naya, what are your thoughts?
I have the simplest answer to this question. Put your pronouns on things. Put it in your emails, your intros, your Zoom. Put it in everything. Because the more cis people that put their pronouns on things, the more normalized it is for trans people to share their pronouns. And that's a really nice thing. I know it's the smallest thing, but it's surprisingly nice. In fact, I just encouraged some hiring managers to put their emails or their pronouns in their email signature. And 3 weeks later, a new candidate was hired, and they come in, and I was talking to them, and they mentioned oh yeah, the hiring manager had pronouns in their email, and that was really awesome to see. So the tiniest change can express support. I think that can't be understated.
Yeah, absolutely. The little things sometimes. Mickey.
I wonder, it's thinking about that, slightly tangential, but I was sort of wondering, what does that world look like where, let's imagine that you're in an environment where there is high take up of this, and the remaining, the few remaining folks that haven't made an explicit sort of gendered identity claim through their pronouns. And I'm just curious, is there, for people that are at maybe a very questioning stage around this, I actually wonder if that is, if that would be difficult for them, maybe if they are sort of pre-transition, or maybe not, maybe they just don't even know whether they're on a path towards a transition or a change in identity or not, and if that would be a positive or negative thing to have kind of that peer pressure around, nailing your colors to the mast, as it were.
Taylor, I see you nodding your head. Chime in.
I was, yes, because that actually is exactly how I was feeling. So I felt what Naya was saying and Mickey was saying. So when I was seeing, I actually had a conversation with my aunt and uncle, and my uncle, who is cisgender male, he didn't understand why people were putting their pronouns in their signatures or their emails or anything, because his daughter goes to a pretty inclusive and diversity school. And he said, yeah, like the gym teacher, he put his pronouns in, he and him. And he's like, I know you're he and him. Why would you put that in there? And we had a conversation around why people do it, people who even are cisgender, why they do it. And we came to the conclusion that it's all for support. It's all to show support for the cause, for the community. And I had never put my mind up, even though, of course, I support the community. I'm in the community. And for the longest time, it was just, Taylor Freeman. And exactly for the longest time, I didn't understand why until Mickey just said it. And the reason was because I did not know what I wanted to be there. I wasn't entirely full on with they and them yet. And he and him was just definitely not what I wanted. And I did not want to be she and her. I've been trying to get away from she and her for a minute, but I didn't know how to do that or what the conversation would be, if there had to be a conversation or anything. So that was actually the reason why I didn't put pronouns into my stuff for a minute until I had the surgery. And then I talked with the therapist, and then we got into the whole thing of what the pronouns mean. And even when it did come down to me picking they and them, he said, honestly, this is your decision. It could take you your lifetime to figure out what pronouns really are for you, or you can make up your own. We're living in a day and age where you can literally just be Taylor if that's all you want, which I think I am really strained towards that one, but I know that's sometimes it's still difficult. You have to put something there. But yeah, that was a very much difficult thing for me to do because I did not know for the longest time what I wanted to go by as.
Taylor, I think you bring up an important point that this is still a contentious thing within the queer community in general, is you don't have to be out to be queer. Like, if you're not in a safe place, if you don't feel like, your life is going to be on the line for being out and you decide not to, or even in a workplace, right? You don't have to. I think what we should focus on is that, a trust that best what your pronouns are, as does every other person. And when that changes, to not make, and this is also, a nod to, hey, cisgender folks, this is how you can practice allyship, not make a big stink when it happens. Like, I remember when you switch from he, him to they, them pronouns, and like, it's like, okay, well, that's what we're going to call it today. And like, how can I support you? Hey, like, I think we had a conversation too, where I was like, hey, like, I used he, him a few times. Like, how did that feel? I'm happy to share space if you need it, because like, language is complex and language has a whole not great history when you really think about it. And ultimately, it's at the end of the day supporting and trusting the person who's making their decision, whether it's no pronouns, all pronouns, day one, it's this, day 100, it's this. Like, it shouldn't, if it's affecting you more than it's affecting the person, there's probably a problem with you, not the person who's trying to go through their pronoun journey.
That makes a lot of sense, Alexis. Anything else from the panel, just in terms of how we can all practice better allyship?
I think just like one thing that I mean, I don't know, like maybe the people that are likely to be watching a panel like this are already kind of on board with this, and it's obvious, but for a lot of people that are, you don't always see the transition, right? Particularly in a corporate environment where teams are changing and people are arriving, new people to the team, new people to the project, things like that. There is, like, I think the very reasonable sort of natural thing to do is just take them as they are, and of course that's what you do. But I think maybe I don't know if it's helpful to hold the idea that it may not be like a person who has like the presentation, the identity that you are seeing, the persona that you're seeing from that person, like that may not be a fully settled thing for them. Like, it may be that they are in a different place, just in terms of like their comfort zone, their support network, the stability of their environment. They may have just had a major life change that you're not aware of, and that they are kind of in that position. And it's not like I don't want to make that a sense of like it's other people's responsibility to dig up that information and like do the probing and work out what the situation is. but I think it is part of just general human compassion of being, of picking up on these things and being empathetic to folks in their life journey. And just, I think maybe appreciating that there are aspects to that life journey that because they're not similar to yours, maybe are just harder to see. And so taking a moment when you have, if your gaydar goes off about someone, then, taking a moment to think about, like, what could that mean? Like, what are sort of the extra ideas that you can bring here about, being, a good fellow human being in the situation that you're not personally that familiar with.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. And around that question and around the use of pronouns, I know personally many people who have been transitioning and have changed their pronouns, and that has been a change for me that I have not always gotten right. How as allies do we do better there in a way that, because we always want to say we're sorry, right? Because we're trying to do better and be better. But how do we manage that in a way where it doesn't put the onus on you to make me feel better about my screw up?
Can I just actually jump in before you get an actual useful answer to that question and just share that I have this problem a lot, right? There is just, despite everything, like despite who I am and everything that has happened in my life, my brain still codes people in a gendered way by default. And sometimes the way that my brain codes people is wrong. And it is a trial. It is so hard for me to reprogram that, even based on so little experience. So I am super sympathetic to the problem. Like, I would also like to have better tools for myself in my relationships with folks.
Thank you for being vulnerable. Any thoughts or tips from folks?
I think one thing that's super helpful is recognizing intent versus impact. I think folks always jump to, oh, good intentions, and like, I didn't mean to do this. And you're trying to save yourself rather than putting your ego aside and acknowledge that at this moment in time, like, harm's been done to a person. Christina and I just had a conversation about this as a queer person. Like, I do misgender folks, and, I feel bad. I'm not going to, make it a 3-minute monologue about how, oh, I'm so, I'm like, no, it's like, you stop, use the correct pronouns for that person and continue on. You can also subtly call out when someone misgenders maybe a friend who you're with. And that's a way of showing up as well. And like, you don't have to make a big, oh my God, you didn't use the correct, it's like, no, like, maybe pull them aside and say like, hey, like, just, like, this person uses they, them pronouns, or this person uses these, their pronouns, and continue on with life. Like, the more I think we focus on us and like trying to be that perfect ally, mind you, perfectionism is a culture point of white supremacy. So Tema Okun, look her up, she's great. It's about, making sure that we're exhibiting community care, making sure that the folks who are traditionally excluded and marginalized feel like they can be safe with us, or cisgendered folks, or like even in our own community. Like, just because you happen to fall within the LGBTQIA alphabet doesn't mean that everything is perfect and hunky-dory and we sing Kumbaya together. So there's a lot of work that can be done.
Yeah, great point. Great point. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I want to jump on that really quickly. When someone misgenders me and then goes on the whole very long, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to, rant, you're moving the burden of, and there really isn't a burden of forgiveness to start, but you're putting a burden of forgiveness on the person you've misgendered. And that's not cool. Like, I shouldn't have to, like, I'm of like, cool, you messed up, just get it right next time. Cool. And if it's a consistent problem, I'll say something. But at the same time, I don't want attention drawn to it either.
Yeah.
And you're making a whole focus. And frequently this happens in large conversations. This isn't an aside. Like, you're not only bringing the attention to me, but you're also bringing attention to the other people who can hear this. And that's not fun.
Yeah.
I think not prolonging the pain is a a good principle.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we have had a ton of very thoughtful, interesting questions come in from the folks who are attending today. So I'm going to switch over and touch on a couple of those. So first, out of the gate, I love this one. In which ways do you think large tech companies are more or less inclusive than smaller startup environments?
If I can jump on that first really fast, I think I've had mostly positive experiences at startups, but I've had one bad one. I actually, prior to coming out at Splunk, about 2 years prior, came out at a different company that shall remain unnamed, and was conveniently let go 2 weeks later. Yeah, that was a fun one. And so I found that startups tend to be more, I don't know what the right word is there, more uniform in their culture. It's a smaller group. And so you end up in these little bubbles that can be really positive or really negative. Whereas with an enterprise environment, you have a much more diverse group of people, frequently like at different locations. Like there are people on this panel I don't think I've seen in person before. And so you end up with frequently a positive experience with those corporate environments, but it's also much more slow moving, and any change you want to make is a bit more of an active effort than with a small environment where you can kind of just push.
I think there's kind of a culture, there's sort of a culture, organizational culture aspect to this, where a smaller group of people, like a startup that's like 5, 10, 15 people, whatever the number is, it is very likely to have a much more cohesive culture, but that culture is dictated by the founders, very likely. And so it can be anything, right? Like there's no, like whoever started that company is probably the person that dictates the culture. Like if they've actually managed to grow it to the point where they're hiring people, like there's probably certain minimum things that you can expect of them, but it could be anything, right? It could be good, it could be bad. Whereas I think that large companies are sort of, there's like 3 things, I guess, that I would expect of a large company that I wouldn't expect of a small company. Like one of which is that it deliberately pays attention to what is a positive culture versus a negative culture. And so they will be looking to develop that, right? And what they come up with like depends on what book they read last, sure, but there's attention being paid to it. The second thing is that they're more sensitive to legalities. And so a company that's somewhere like California, right, where we actually have very robust protections for diversity, the companies that come from California have probably incorporated that into their culture pretty directly, as opposed to companies that maybe come from, that call other places home, even if they're large companies, right? And I think the third thing is that if neither of those 2 things apply, then I expect that a company will institutionalize whatever is common around them, right? Like the larger you are, the harder it is for a culture to evolve. And so if it's not being driven by, somebody, the CEO read a book about culture that they really liked and they're applying the things. And if it's not driven by legal and HR are driving to meet particular requirements, it's going to be like, what is the prevailing culture outside? And maybe if that's a company that's coming from somewhere conservative, then, maybe that's what you just have to expect, that they will have internalized that culture.
And to amplify a point that Nia and Mickey, combining their 2 points, is it's not enough to just be like big company versus small company. There are a lot of other factors, and especially now in a pandemic where most of us are remote, we could technically work anywhere around the world. So if you have a company that is founded in a city, in a country where homophobia can land you in prison, probably not going to be safe no matter the company size. I know, for me, I came from a startup that I was the 40th employee when I started and the 120th when I left. Splunk is a 6,000 person company, and I find Splunk to me more comforting because I didn't see anyone who looked like me at the last startup I was at. And I didn't feel comfortable coming out because of that. That being said, you know, thinking about the intersectionality and like all the, not to pay a pun off of Splunk's million data points, but like we are complex people. So I was very much embraced for being a woman of color, and like I never had any discrimination because of my gender, and like I did not feel comfortable being out. Meanwhile at Splunk, like seeing the Pride ERG and like when work was really tough, like that was a family who I could go to and be like, yeah, like I'm out, rainbow flags forever, you know. And seeing that, I will say objectively, typically larger companies have more spend for employee resource groups and are thinking about how to, you know, make sure that everyone's happy. And two, by a numbers game, you're probably going to probably being the key word in that statement, have a larger range of, you know, backgrounds, gender identities, gender expressions, ancestry, etc. So I would say just do your research as much as you can, because you can't look off of like 100-word abstract or Crunchbase or Glassdoor to determine whether or not the team that you are specifically applying to is going to be helpful.
Yeah, that's really insightful. That's really insightful. Thanks, Alexis. Okay, so we have time for one last question, which I think is a really good one. How can I, as a trans and or non-binary person, get into a technical company like Splunk? I would love that work culture, but don't have expertise in high tech. So as someone who spent a long career not in tech before coming to Splunk, I think this is a really great question. Would love to get some of the panel's insights, but from my point of view, I think it is all about building a really, really strong network. And that's part of what we're doing here today, is to show our faces and to be present and to be available, because getting roles in different companies is not always just pressing the apply button. Getting roles in different companies is building a network and building trusted advisors who can help you seek out what's right and what's not, and give you coaching on how to get your foot in the door and how to position yourself. So just know that that's why we are here. That is why we do what we do. So anyone else want to maybe give a perspective?
I would also maybe say, don't underestimate the diversity of roles that a large tech company has and requires. There's, I guess, so if I understand the premise correctly, the premise is that you know, there's a company that you like the culture of, and it's a tech company, but you don't have a tech background, and perhaps you aren't necessarily interested in developing you know, those technical skills. Like maybe that's not an interest or a passion for you. And so gaining access to that corporate culture, like there are, you know, a tech company has you know, the engineering org inside Splunk is not the majority of the company, right? Like there are a lot of other roles at Splunk that you know, are participate in all of the cultural aspects, but are not, you know, about, you know, code. They're not about, you know, specifically the details of whatever it is that about tech that doesn't appeal to you. And so, like, don't dismiss them out of hand. I don't know that I actually have more specific advice around that, but I would certainly encourage people to, if they're assuming that tech is not accessible because they are not personally a tech person, I don't think that's actually true. I think that there is a lot of diversity in roles and a lot of diversity in backgrounds that we hire for.
Yeah, great advice. Great advice. Taylor, any thoughts on that?
Yes, especially because I too am someone who did not come from any type of technological education. I came through a program, and honestly, to this day, I really believe the only reason I am here in Splunk is because of my personality. I'm not the smartest person in the world, but I can talk a good game. I am very good with my words. And the entire interview process, like the candidate I was going up against, she had the resume, okay? She had the skills, she had all of that, but I came and I think I just kind of gave a little bit more personality. And I think that's what actually got me on the team that I'm on. But yes, as far as just like Mickey was saying, this, I did not know because again, when I got here, I was like, okay, I gotta be really smart. I gotta pass these exams. Like right now, I am actually certified as a Splunk admin. I can't do anything with it though. I'm not gonna lie, I do not remember anything that went into it, but I got it. And so I say for those people, it's good to obtain and to, have on the resume, but again, you don't need, especially for a company like this, you do not need all the technological background to be successful in really, I think, any role. And then even so, you can learn the skill here.
So I want to just add one more thing as a coda on that, that as a hiring manager, like when I look to bring people on, there's two ways to think about this, right? Like you can look at the skills, you can look at the resume that they're bringing, and you do that when it's like, I have a real problem that I need to solve today. I need to solve it in the next 3 months. And it's like, who can hit the ground running? But I don't honestly like doing that. Like that is not the thing that I want to be doing. Like what I want to be doing is I want to be bringing on people who are excited about the future, who have the potential to grow. And that's the system that is the system that we want to be encouraging and fostering. So the strength of the resume, sure, like there are a bunch of things that it's useful to have a strength of resume for. But the critical thing is, how are we going to grow together over the next few years? Like Splunk invests in people for the long term, and we believe in bringing on people that we're going to develop and grow with together. We don't know what's coming in the world. Like the future is unknown, and we want people that we can do this with.
Yeah.
So
I want to really quickly ditto that sentiment, because when I came to Splunk, I came in as a technical role. So this will apply if you don't have technical skills, but do want to have a technical role. I knew like how to talk to stuff on Python, and that was it when I came here. And I got the job not because of a resume or not because of my education, but because I talked about beehives to the hiring manager during the entire interview. Like most of my interview was just talking about bees. And it was the passion and the fact that I could communicate that clearly that I think that really kind of sealed the deal on that and helped me get the job.
It's not what you do, it's how you do it and who you are. So with that, we are at time. Again, Naya, Mickey, Taylor, Alexis, a huge thank you for your time, your energy, your insights, and honestly to everyone who has attended or who will listen into this. Thank you. Thank you for listening and for learning with us. We ask all of you allies out there to continue to listen, to learn, to advocate, to educate. Thanks again, and be well and be safe.